Hello and welcome to Conway Conversations. My name is Carol Bulman, CEO of Jack Conway, and I will be your host this afternoon. We have a very important topic to talk about today. Yes, now is the best time to sell. In fact, Realtor.com states that the late spring, early summer offers the perfect storm to be able to sell a home. We've got fewer price reductions, lower competition from sellers, and we've got fewer people in the market basically looking to put their houses on the market. So it definitely does affect a seller and their ability to be able to get the best price for their home and the most buyers to look at their property. So I've invited three wonderful guests to join me this afternoon to talk about this topic. First, I'd like to start with Sandi LaCasse. Sandi is one of our top agents with Jack Conway, working out of our Sandwich office. Sandi, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the call.
Thanks for being here, Sandi. Sandi's market is, for the most part, Cape Cod, south of the bridge, although she does pop her nose over the bridge from time to time. And, you know, we were just having a little pre-conversation. We do have some market variations between the different types of markets that Jack Conway covers. So Sandi's going to be bringing a really important perspective of that area. So thank you, Sandi. I'd like to welcome Mike Guimares from our Hanover office. He is killing it on the South Shore side and sort of metro west of our territory, doing a lot with new construction. Welcome, Mike, to Conway Conversations.
Thanks, Carol. I'm really excited to be here today. It's a great topic for everybody. So thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thanks for being here. And finally, I'd like to introduce Mike Nielsen. Mike Nielsen is a top loan officer with Guaranteed Rate. Guaranteed Rate and Jack Conway have a relationship that we support each other, and we've had incredible success and lots of happy buyers working with Mike and all the loan officers at Guaranteed Rate. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate being here and looking forward to contributing.
Great. Thank you all. So let's jump into this topic. And, you know, in the next 45 minutes, Sandi, Mike N, and Mike G, and they will be Mike N and Mike G for the next 45 minutes, they're going to dig into this topic and bring some perspective that our listeners may not necessarily think of. Not only prices, but the whys behind prices, why this time of the year is so critical in the real estate market, how it affects not only sellers, but also buyers. And we're also going to get into how to prepare a home for sale and to put your property in the best possible light for potential buyers. Mike will bring lots of great perspective as it relates to the mortgage market and where our rates are going and how that affects things. And so I'm going to jump into this topic. We have 45 minutes to discuss now being the best time to sell and lots to cover. So thanks all of you. Sandi, I'm going to start with you. What makes springtime, late spring, early summer, such a good time to sell from both a seller perspective and also best time to buy from a buyer's perspective? Sandi?
Hi, Carol. Sorry, you froze up for a minute on me.
Did we freeze? Let me jump at that again.
Okay, thank you.
From your perspective, why is this time of the year the best time to sell? And to comment on why this is such a good time for buyers as well.
Sure. So just in general, it is still in the real estate market, it is still a seller's market. We have lower inventory and high demand. So that alone makes it a great time to sell. But as far as now being springtime, there are numerous reasons, and one of them is just so basic, but it's that it's spring. And it sounds so fundamental, but the weather gets nicer, things start to get greener, the days are lighter in the afternoons, and people are ready to get out and about and go look at real estate. Everyone's yards look a little bit better. The curb appeal is up. You know, you might see greenery where it was kind of dreary and not so becoming in the winter months. So properties are showing better, and sellers are more likely to be getting their homes prepared in the winter, and they're ready to go on because they know that the buyers are going to be there. The buyers are ready to come out, which increases the amount of sellers that want to get on because they want to be on the market for when those buyers hit the road. And springtime in general is a great time, especially around New England, because people want to wrap up their sale before early summer so they can say, great, we're closing in June, we'll be in for the summer. And families want to say, great, we'll be in by the end of June, early July, so the kids can settle in and start the new school year in September. So it's sort of like that old adage of when you have a toddler and it's sleep begets sleep. It's like the more that gets on, the more buyers that come on to eat up at those properties.
You know, that's so great because you talked a lot about the psychological aspect of buying and selling a home. And so much of what you all do is psychology and how people feel about both selling their home and getting it ready, and buyers and how they're going to feel coming in. And then you talked about the timing aspect of it. So as a follow-up to that, Sandi, people talk about inventory. There is low inventory. Tell us what that means. Give us some perspective around that. Are you seeing more houses come on? And as a result, are you seeing more buyers come in? And how does that help both sides of the transaction?
It's almost like in the spring, the buyers are at bay, just waiting to see those drip campaigns that start when traditionally maybe over the winter, you might go 2 days before you saw a new listing in town in any particular zip code. And now you wake up in the morning and it's like, Monday or Tuesday morning, it's like, wow, there's 3 new listings. Isn't this exciting? So we get excited and buyers get excited too. And buyers get especially excited because there's more property to choose from. And they also have a better chance because when there's only one house that the entire market is going for, or only 5 houses active in a particular zip code, it makes the demand so high. And the buyers, as we know, there's multiple offers, and for just your typical buyer, it's very challenging. So when there's more houses on the market, it makes it a little more even of a playing field for the buyers.
I love that. So I think that's an important point is you started off your conversation by saying that we're in a seller's market, which we all know means that there's more buyers for the amount of houses we have for sale. But in the spring market, you have more of both. Both rise so that you have more opportunities for buyers and, of course, better solutions for our sellers, sort of better outcomes. So that's a great point. Mike G, I hear a lot of my baby boomer friends, they may be still sitting in that 4-bedroom colonial on the cul-de-sac and might be reluctant to sell a home because they say, well, where am I going to go? There's I'm going to be living? What am I looking at, a condo? Am I looking at a rental? What are my options out there? I think that's a very real thing for people to think through. What type of advice would you give a seller like that?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, this is a very emotional transaction, right? I mean, especially in situations where they're selling a home they've owned for a number of years and have now come to the realization it's time to move on and maybe downsize. And not seeing a lot of properties on the market makes them start to wonder and worry that if they do put theirs on and they feel it's going to sell quickly, where do I go? And there are options. It's important for sellers to understand with a professional working by their side, they're never going to be left homeless. There's verbiage and protections that you can put in place on their listings to make sure that any buyer that comes in understands that it's subject to these sellers finding somewhere to go. Now that may be a couple different options. They may look to rent something in the meantime before they find the perfect home that they want to move to, or they may just say they want a couple of months to find that perfect property and need to make sure the buyers are flexible enough to wait that period out. And I think that when you're in a market like this, where the sellers are kind of in the driver's seat with regards to negotiating specific details in terms of the transaction, buyers are more willing to wait if they found that perfect home. So it used to be that was a big turnoff that, oh my gosh, the sellers have to find something. But buyers can't find what they want either. So when they do find that perfect home, they're willing to stretch the timeline. Maybe they're renting and they're able to wait it out. And I think it's an important tool that sellers can use to make sure they're not pressured to get out of their home too quick or fearful that they're not going to have a place to live.
So in other words, the potential buyer may have gone through the same thing. So they might be a little bit more sympathetic to a new buyer coming into their house with the same challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have buyers that, as Sandy said, they're sitting on the sidelines, but they may have gone through this search prior to coming into winter, and they realize there's this scarcity of listings on the market. And so now, when they're entering back in and they see that perfect house, perhaps they renegotiated their own rental property or their lease, and they understand, listen, if we found the right house and we get it under agreement with the right terms, maybe we have to wait a couple extra months for the seller to find something, but they're willing to do that because now they've found the home that they want to move to, and they're definitely a lot more flexible than they were.
So you're seeing some flexibility, you're seeing some willingness. What are some clever ideas that you've come up with, or that things that you've offered for your potential buyer clients to think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the buy side, the important thing about buying a home is it's not always just price. It's structuring the transaction and the terms that are going to fit perfectly for a buyer. So sometimes buyers they're in a position, if they're in a property they're not rushed out of, they can close early, rent back. So the folks that are in the home can pay the mortgage while it's there, and then as soon as they find something, they're flexible. That helps a lot of times in cases where the seller, when they want to go find something else, they want to put an offer in that's strong, and they want to show that they've already closed on their property. They have the funds available. They can close quickly. It gives them a little bit more negotiating power on their purchase. So if a buyer's in the right situation that will allow that, that's a really good tool. What you do want to be careful of is that you don't have these protracted periods of time where the sellers are going to rent it for 3, 4, 5, 6 months or longer. There's some risk there with something happening to the home. So there's always things that you want to consider. But I think that's the important part about having a professional by your side to help you through some of those challenges.
Yeah, I would think that could be a great solution, but also wrought with some challenges. And that's where having someone like you or Sandy by your side walking you through is so important. What's the max that you would recommend in a time like that, a rent back type of situation?
Yeah, generally 3 months is the period of time that I try to keep my buyers to, because I think that if the sellers are, and you can always renegotiate that. If you get closer 2 months out and the buyers still have a flexible month-to-month arrangement in their own rental, and the sellers are clearly looking, and maybe they did get something under agreement, but they need maybe an extra 3 weeks, you can always renegotiate that period. But you want to make sure the sellers are pushed to try to find something, that they don't take their time and they're a little bit more aggressive.
Sure, that's important. One thing I do want to offer before I go on to Meg N on a mortgage question is if anybody in the audience has any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. I will see them and I can offer them out to our panelists.
Carol, I have one little comment on that too.
Absolutely.
Chiming in, it's also really important to stay really close with the lender, because some lenders have requirements on how long that they can offer a lease back before they have to take occupancy. So it is such a great tool that Mike mentioned. Like, that is like such a great thing to offer. If the buyers can hold back and let this, oh, gee, do you want to have a half a more summer in your summer house before you have to leave? So great. But just keep abreast with your lender, because the lender might say, like, they can have 59 days before they have to take occupancy, and then it's over. So just something to keep in mind.
Very important. That's a great segue on to Mike. And Mike, can you comment on what Sandy just talked about?
Yes. So what she's bringing up there is if they're occupying it as their primary, it needs to be that 60-day time period that they're getting in. So if they're going conventional, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they have 60 days. If they're getting VA or FHA financing, I believe it's 30 that they have to get in.
So in other words, that limit, if those people are getting a mortgage through Fannie Mae, yep, they could offer some type of lease back, but the cap would be 60 days so that they could take occupancy.
Yes, correct.
All right, great. Thank you. That was a great point, Sandy. Thank you. From a mortgage perspective, Mike, what types of strategies are you using right now or suggesting to your buyer clients and your seller clients to help people through this market that we're in?
Yeah, of course. So I'm only getting really involved if it's a client that's selling and staying local to the market, right? So if they're selling and then becoming a buyer, if we know it's a good time to sell and we're talking about all these characteristics that make it a good time to sell, sometimes sellers can see that as hurdles to be a buyer, right? So then where I'm really getting involved and trying to be a good strategic piece of the puzzle, if you will, is within a client's risk tolerance. what are they open to? Are they open to bridge financing? Are they open to a cross collateral loan? Can they qualify on the purchase side of things while not having a home sale contingency so they can start making offers before their house is even listed or sold? And maybe they don't even need to get to the leaseback option because they can kind of set those dominoes up ahead of time and have it match the market as best as possible so they can make competitive offers as a buyer, right? That's typically usually the hardest hurdle is great time to sell, makes it a harder time to buy, even with that uplift of inventory, right? Because if you have a client that's trying to sell in Plymouth and stay in Plymouth, their inventory washes out because they're selling and buying in the same market. So they're bringing something to the market, but they're also trying to take something off the market. So that's really where I try to get involved and have as open of a mindset as possible. So that, because it's never one size fits all. It's always, what's your current situation, Mr. or Mrs. Seller? Where's your equity at? Where's your profile? What do you have for current liquidity? What's your risk tolerance on carrying two houses potentially, right? Going over all of those different things. Are there certain programs that could help? Like I said, bridge financing. So it's really just being as consultative as possible during that step. And usually I get involved right after a seller consultation occurs with an agent where they say, okay, now you have to go talk to a lender if you're not going to be buying cash or you want to use short-term financing. And that's the perspective I try to bring is how can I help you navigate those waters so that you're a competitive buyer so that doesn't seem like it's too big of a hurdle for you to overcome.
That point you just made is so, so important. And I know Sandi and Mike would agree, is bringing a loan officer like Mike in very, very early on will make your buyer that much more competitive. And that's critical because you just offered out several different tools, all complicated. And for someone that doesn't know the business, so they will need assistance through the process. Would you take a couple minutes and give us a few definitions and some of the things that you talked about? So let's first talk about what a bridge is compared to cross-collateralization. How do you?
Yes. So bridge loan is, and I'm going to use a hypothetical of a client, right? Let's say a client's finally deciding to sell that 4-bedroom, 2-bath colonial that they've outgrown. Kids are all gone. It's worth $1 million and they own it outright. And they want to downsize to a $600,000 single story, single family somewhere in a different market. Maybe they don't have the liquidity to go be a cash buyer right away, and they want to be as competitive as possible. So how do they enter the market as a cash buyer, but not actually use their cash? That's where bridge financing comes into play. So bridge financing, you can typically get up to 60 to 75% of the home's current value. And that's the house that they're exiting. So it's the house they're currently in. So it's short-term debt. So the bridge financing company already knows going into it, you're not going to be carrying this loan for too long. So you get that bridge loan set up. That essentially is now your buying power. So you get that $600,000. Now you can enter the market as a buyer, as a cash buyer. And typically with bridge financing, there's usually some safety nets built in. Like one of the programs we have, you actually can, through the bridge proceeds, set up the payments to the bridge loan. So it doesn't negatively impact your month-to-month budget. So it's kind of baked into the equity of the house that you already have. So it can really set you up. So it's very short term. It's, here's your money, interest only payments for 1 year. And it doesn't matter that your house is listed, which is usually an issue for traditional financing. It's really hard to get a cash out refinance from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac if your house is listed. You pretty much can't. So the bridge financer knows this is short term. This is a very short term relationship. And they can even take some of that equity to make the payment for you so that it can be set up so that equity is then escrowed to make the payment to the bridge loan so that you're not putting yourself in a budgetary restraint monthly. And then you can take that money, go buy the house. Cross collateral loan, not used as much. I think people get a little off put by it to a degree or another, but it is one of those that I have brought up there as a solution oriented program. And it really has to be square, peg, square hole, right? If that makes sense. Because a cross collateral is what we're going to do is we're going to take the current equity And we're going to do this fund mortgage calculation on what you have for current equity and what your next purchase loan is for the next house that you're buying. And is there a scenario where we can essentially use both properties and use your current equity to make your down payment on your purchase, right? Without actually creating any liquidity. And you just close with one loan. So then you still close without a home sale contingency. So that's really what these programs are designed for, is that as you exit the house you're in, how do I become a strong buyer, right? And if we know it's competitive from a buyer's standpoint, how do we avoid the home sale contingency? So that's when I'm having those conversations is, does a bridge finance loan work? Does cross collateral loan work? And, you know, what's the goal of these types of creative financing? Because it's not your traditional 30-year fixed. And when I have those conversations with clients, they want their traditional 30-year fixed. So it really has to solve a problem in the market. The problem it solves is, how do I make an offer without a home sale contingency and get as aggressive as I can within my risk tolerance, if that makes sense.
Mike, can I ask 2 questions on that, Mike? As far as the bridge loan, is it fully funded to, say, a seller's, the seller's getting the bridge loan to their account, so that I'm putting an offer in on a house for them to buy, that I can show proof of funds in their account, so it's fully funded? And yes. My second question is the interest rate a lot higher on that because it's a bridge?
Yes.
Okay.
So yes and yes. So ideally, they get the bridge loan as quickly as possible because they want to be able to make that cash offer proof of funds. So they want that money in the bank, proof of funds, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here you go. The interest rate's going to be higher. You're probably going to see some inflated closing costs because, again, the financer there, the bridge provider, knows this is a short-term relationship, right? Knows this is short-term debt. So you're not going to see it anything close to your traditional 30-year fixed. And again, going over these, because they're in the corner, I have a saying when I go over things with my clients that anytime anyone in finance says the word creative, get your checkbook out. It's going to be more expensive. So anytime you hear creative from anyone that's like me in the banking world, know that that's going to usually come with some sort of a cost. Because if we're getting creative, what we're doing is we're going around the traditional, right? We're underwriting something a little bit differently. Maybe we're doing a different income calculation or anything along those lines. So a bridge loan, in essence, we know it's going to be short term. The bank has to find a way to kind of make up that deficit that you might only have this loan for a month, 2 months, 1 year tops, right? And ideally, you don't carry it that long. Ideally, you are in and out. You get your benefit of getting your liquidity, making your cash offer, and you pay it off as soon as possible so you're not paying that higher interest rate for a long period of time.
Thank you.
So Sandy's customer is going to weigh the benefit between paying the extra fees and interest rate. They may be able to defer payments, like include them in the loan amount itself, but they're still paying them at some point, with the advantage of being a cash buyer. So I want to stay with that point for a minute. Mike G, I'm going to go over to you. Why is the concept for our buyers, buyers and our sellers out there, why is the concept of being a cash buyer so important in this market such as the one we're in right now?
Yeah, this is incredible that Mike's brought this stuff up. It helps any kind of buyer be competitive. When you're out there purchasing a home and you're competing against 10, 15 other buyers, you want to try to put yourself ahead of the pack. And not having to worry about mortgage financing and having the cash already secured up front makes you a much stronger buyer, less risk to the seller. They stop worrying about what the appraisals are going to look like, and the timeline might be a little bit more expedient. So prepping in advance and understanding your situation and talking to your lender about some of the programs that are available is going to make you a much more attractive buyer to any seller out there, because you can move fast. And right now that's the key. When you're competing against 9, 10 other buyers, and there's all kinds of contingencies in place that have to be hurdles that have to be passed, you're going to stand far and above the other buyers.
So to that point, Mike, then if you have a seller that has a large amount of equity in their home, so let's take the baby boomer again. They've lived in their house for 30 years. They've gained equity. That's where their wealth is. They're going to be taking that money out eventually once they sell it to purchase another home, but they're in that in-between stage. and they want to be, you said there could be 10 offers, there could be 12 offers, right? And I know what all of you doing is sales agents right now and helping your buyers. You've got spreadsheets and you've got them all lined up so that you can present them to your sellers. When you're going over that spreadsheet with your seller client, how are you going to describe that customer again? So just so our audience understands why that's so important.
Yeah, I mean it's a buyer. I'm advising my sellers to look at all of the terms and seeing a buyer that has a cash offer that can close quicker and there's less to be concerned about. Right now, we always worry about appraisals is one of the appraisals and inspections are the most fearful things for folks when they're entering a transaction because you don't know what you're going to find on an inspection in many cases. And an appraisal has to come in and it has to appraise at a value that's going to support your loan to make sure you get the same rate that you've gotten quoted to you. So, a seller has to look at that from the perspective of it's a much cleaner purchase with less risk. And I'm going to show them exactly, here, yes, you may be offered a little bit more, but it's a buyer that has a loan contingency or other inspection contingencies or things that are in place that may not make it the best offer on the table. And I think that's really important for folks to know is it's a story. It's not just price anymore. It's an entire picture of what that buyer brings to the table.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Having an expert in your corner, whether it's a buyer's agent or a seller's agent or a loan officer, is so critical because you have that unrelated party that can present your story to the other party in just the most powerful way. Sorry, excuse me. Now, let me talk, we cannot have a conversation about buyers and sellers in this market without talking about interest rates. So Mike Nielsen, I'm going to go to you for a moment. Give us a thumbnail of what's going on with interest rates. What are you hearing? What are the reasons why we are where we are? What are your thoughts?
Gotcha. So everyone was very optimistic leading out of 2023 that 2024 was going to be the turnaround for rates. We were going to see that big pivot from the Fed. It was very heavily weighted that March is going to be the first rate cut, and that slipped away pretty quickly. And for everyone out there, the Fed does their overnight lending rate or their Fed rate. It doesn't directly impact mortgage rates, but it does send a ripple into the bond market, and the bond market impacts mortgage rates in particular. So what we have going on right now is the Fed has a high rate where they deem restrictive because they're trying to curb inflation. But they also have the dual mandate of keeping inflation down at their target of 2%, which we're somewhere in the threes right now with the most recent print. And they also have the dual mandate of maximum employment. So they try to look at both characteristics as to where they keep their rate. And then you see the market adjust based on their positioning, right? The cost of money impacts everyone from that standpoint. So what's happening right now this year is inflation is not going away. It's remaining rather sticky compared to where their target level of 2% is. So we're in the threes now. Great progress from the peak of 2022 in June when it was at 9%. So we've definitely made great progress, but it's not quite where they want to see it at. And there hasn't been a slowdown in the labor market. Unemployment's remained rather low, and jobs growth has been strong. GDP has been strong. There hasn't been an indicator there or signals that we're having any sort of recession. So they deem that they're in a good restrictive policy that's not negatively impacting their dual mandate. So what I mean by that is they haven't negatively impacted jobs, and they also haven't accomplished the goal of inflation down. What that's doing from their perspective is that's taking rate cuts off the table. And when they're taking rate cuts off the table, that impact to the bond market is you're going to see rates stay higher for a little bit longer. That's the conversation I've been having with all of my clients, even since rates went up in 2022. You can't predict the market. So the way that I've been approaching it, and you hear a lot of lenders preach this, they've been not as much lately because I think they don't want to, take foot and insert mouth, is date the rate, marry the house. I never went over that with my clients. I always gave them the hard, fast truth of we don't know what rates are going to do. Rates might go to 10%. So your 7% rate today might be spectacular. Rates might go to 5% in 2 months. So then it'll be a great opportunity to refinance. my biggest conversation I have with clients is always in the now and the current. It's, do you feel comfortable buying this house with the down payment, with the payment, with the interest rate, everything along those lines? Because where you'll find yourself in a sticky mess is buying it based on the idea that you're going to refinance pretty quickly, right? You never want to be in that position. And then all of a sudden the market does something completely different. Because if we go back in history, in 2022, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're pretty smart when it comes to mortgages. Their prediction for interest rates was by the end of 2022, the worst case, they'll probably be somewhere in the fours. The end of 2022, we were in the high sixes. So they missed their speculation pretty drastically. So from that standpoint, if you base it purely off speculation and then you make concrete decisions, you don't really want to do that. So the conversations I'm having a lot right now, and to keep it within the idea of sellers and buyers. So if you're not a first-time home buyer, you're selling and buying. What I'm doing a lot with my clients right now that are in that spot is net math. I'm having a conversation with them about where their current equity is from the sale of their house, and they're trying to, roll it over to the purchase of the house. The conversation I'm having with them to help them, particularly for the upgraders, right? You have those clients that are in the raised ranch that want to move to that colonial that we're hoping the boomer will start selling. And they're trying to digest selling that 3% interest rate of the current house. They have a ton of equity. They bought right in 2016, 17. And for all the realtors out there and clients out there that are in that boat or talking to sellers of this those are the hardest ones to get off the fence right now, right? Because they don't want to trade in that interest rate for 7%. So the conversation I'm having a lot with them is, let's take your $200,000 in equity. It doesn't have to all go to down payment. We can take some of it and apply a lot of it to discount points. And at the end of the day, the only risk of doing that is looking back in history. If a year from now you refinance and you paid discount points this year for a 6% rate compared to a 7% rate, but that 6% rate made the payment digestible for your life and for your economy, and rates go to 5.5% next year, you didn't need to pay discount points. That's really the big risk. But if rates go to 9% next year, you look back in history and go, that was a really good decision. I'm very happy I paid discount points. And there's no way to know that in the future. So I'm having that conversation with a lot of sellers in the sense of, almost don't pay attention to the news. Don't pay attention to people that are trying to sell you something. Let's have a real conversation about your situation and what would it take for you to feel comfortable buying the next house, and don't count on a refinance. If a refinance becomes an opportunity down the road, spectacular, we'll have that conversation. But what would it take now for you to feel comfortable trading your raised ranch for the colonial in the neighborhood that you want to be in and upgrading so that you don't have to stay put in your current house? And that's really the viewpoint I have on rates is there's not one size fits all, very similar to the first question we went over. And there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to paying discount points. And you really should be having a very thorough conversation with your loan officer about the ramifications of paying them, not paying them, the risk, what you're comfortable taking on for a future rate, future payment, and just have that deep dive, right? So from the standpoint of that, circling back to the original question of what rate's going on, there's no way to really know. And when there's no way to really know, all you can work with is what's the information today and how can I make the most empowered educational decision based on the information I have.
Mike, that's great. I'm going to go to Mike Guimares, but I want to ask you a follow-up question on that. Would you define what a discount point is? And for those of the people who don't know what a percentage, because we have been talking in points for a long time, and the word point is back into our vocabulary again. So could you explain what that means? And when you say a person is paying discount points, what exactly are they doing that? What's that mechanism?
Yes. So discount points applies to the scenario where you say, hey, I'm going to get a quote from a lender and the lender offered me 7.25 with no discount points. So I'm just paying my traditional closing costs, and based on my credit score, my profile, down payment, all of the things that unfortunately dehumanize us and make us a number, right? So your loan to value, how much money you make, all of that good stuff. So then you'll have a rate available to you just based on the market, based on where rates are at today. If you look at that number and you go, well, I don't really like the payment associated with that, how can I get a lower rate? you have the option to pay your lender to essentially bring that rate down to offset the fact that that rate is lower than what's available in the market without actually changing anything about your profile. So you're not putting more of a down payment, your credit score is not increasing, you're not changing your loan program. You're just saying within this one category of just interest rate, how do I get a lower rate? You can pay extra closing costs to offset that market difference, hence the discount points. So we're
Right.
discounting your loan value and offering you a lower rate from that standpoint.
They're basically paying some interest up front. They're prepaying to get a lower rate to make that, as you said, that payment more palatable. One comment I just want to make is for the people listening, don't be afraid of that. You know, that's the market we're in, and it's a great way to look at things depending on your circumstances. So thanks, Mike, for that.
Yeah.
Mike Guimares, you had a comment on that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is really important. You know, it's the biggest financial investment people make, right? And I think everything that Mike just talked about there goes to the importance of having the conversation about what the options are, because everyone just hears the rate in the market, and we hear it from buyers and sellers that we come to us to talk about selling a house or buying a home, and they're worried about the rate. And until they have that conversation to look at their story, their profile, and understanding what's available to them to make it a more affordable purchase, they're buying today at a price that we believe is going to continue to increase over time. They're going to have equity 2, 3, 4 years from now. Real estate's the best investment. So Mike, the stuff that Mike just went over, I hope people will re-listen to, because it's really important that they understand they have options. There's more than just one loan product out there.
And Mike, you just made such a great point that we need to pay attention to is, yes, the rates are a little bit higher than they were, but prices are also increasing. So, and one specific question I have for you and Sandi, even though we've seen some increase in rates over this last year, we don't have any shortage of buyers. Is that correct?
I'll let you go, Sandi, first.
Sandi?
No, I have buyers. I have a long list of buyers, like you say, and they are doing really creative things. I see different groups of buyers even. It's not just the fiancés that are going out to buy a purchase. Now I'm seeing like couples that are friends that are moving out of Southie and are going to make an arrangement to buy a home on the South Shore so that they can afford it. So there's so many different scenarios where people are really changing it up because they want to buy. And like Mike was saying, they want that investment. They want to start really building their portfolio with real estate.
Yeah, and I would argue too that the buyers that are in the game now are much more qualified and prepared, and they've absorbed the fact that rates have increased. When rates first started going up rapidly in 2022, it was shock, and everyone kind of paused, and there was a 6-month period there that we didn't know where were the buyers. They've all absorbed it now. They understand the situation. They've become a little bit more educated about what's happening in the real estate marketplace. And now they've put themselves in a position that they're okay with the rates that they are at today. And they've just adjusted their purchasing expectations. So, while we don't have flurries of buyers like we did when interest rates were 3%, we have solid buyers. We have buyers that know what they're doing now. And I think that's an even more important point to stress. So sellers can understand that it's not just folks that are out looking and wasting time. These are folks that are vested in the process, and they're ready for what they're out there seeing.
That's a great point. And the other thing too is I think there's a lot to be said for consistency and non-volatility. I think our buyers and our sellers get very nervous when rates are jumping around a lot. Rates have been fairly consistent, Mike N. Is that correct?
They have been. We've seen recently a floor and a ceiling that rates are hovering around for a 30-year fix, top tier financing. So I'm going to use that as the benchmark. Mid 6s to mid 7s. That's been, about where we've been fluttering. We haven't really tested the barrier in either direction recently, right? So the volatility has gone out. They still do seesaw pretty widely compared to much less volatile markets, right? Like a rate adjusting from a Friday to a Monday by 0.5 percentage point. that's unheard of in a typical market. So they are moving a little bit, but in the grand scheme of the past 2 years, that's not a knee-jerk reaction anymore. So I think, like Mike was saying, buyers have kind of gotten used to that. I know that's a big talking point I go over with my buyers is, we kind of need a plan for a bad scenario, right? Like I started having conversations with buyers that, would you buy the house if the rate was this? And if the rates get better, great. So then they're kind of prepared for that scenario. So again, to what Mike was saying, buyers are now, if they're in the market and entering the market now, they don't have a memory of 3% if they're a first-time home buyer.
That's great.
So they're just working the current times.
And so we talked about a couple different seller groups. We talked about the baby boomers who have lots of equity in their home, and they have that fear of not having somewhere to go. So we talked about the different options with that. Mike Guimares got into a lot of different details there. Then we talked about that next group down that may have bought the 2-bedroom Cape or raised ranch. Their family is growing and they need more space, but they've got a 2% rate. So in that case, they really have to balance the fact that the values are increasing. So even though the rates have gone up, that they still may be in a better situation. And then there's other types of products out there to assist them with that, maybe, payment shock, if you will. So Sandi, I want to talk about sort of the softer things. If I'm a seller and I want to get my property ready to sell, and what do I want? I want the best possible price for my investment. What are some suggestions that you make to your sellers?
Oh, this is the good stuff. I love this part of my job. The first thing I try to explain to everyone is that when buyers are going out there to find a house, 9 out of 10 times, maybe even closer to 9 out of 10, their first experience with that home is going to be on their computer or on their phone. It's going to be on the internet. For that reason, professional photography is so important. But for the professional photography to look excellent, my advice is always going in. The first thing is get everything super organized, get everything really streamed down, make it look picture perfect, make it look like, so many people with crazy, busy lives, the papers get stacked, the books are all in the corner, and they walk into that house that's so organized and tidy, or see it online and they're like, oh, that's my dream to have that house that's so organized. And it's also taking out of that the personalization of the house so that the buyer can picture their own self in the house and not the pictures of your, vacation with your family. They really want to see a blank canvas so that they can envision their self in it. And the second thing that I usually try to really coach, especially at this time of year, is curb appeal, because people are going to see it and then they're going to go like, let's get in the car, let's go do a drive-by. The open house is until Saturday, let's go check it out. And if that curb appeal, and it's not that difficult to make it shine this time of year, but really investing the time to prune back the bushes, make the front door look great, mulch goes so far, detach the grass, whatever it is to just make it really pop. Because the house is what it is, but anything that you can do to just uplift it a little bit, it is going to affect your price, because it's going to create more buyers that are interested in your house. And the more buyers that are interested, the higher the price is going to go.
So it affects demand. That's fabulous. And do you feel that a buyer, if the lawn isn't mowed, the bushes aren't pruned back, they might feel, well, what's the inside look like, right? Or has the basement been taken care of?
Well, Mike was saying about telling a story. So that all tells the story of, geez, have they even ever changed the filters in the
exactly.
furnace? Has the furnace ever even been maintained? Another soft approach that I use with my clients is like any pamphlets that you find around the house for the dishwasher, for the microwave, receipts that you have that the lawn people were coming and fertilizing. Let's put them in a beautiful book and translucent paper. And people come in like, oh my gosh, these people are so organized. Their impression is they must have been taking care of everything over the years.
Which increases more people, higher value, right? That's so important, Sandi. We have 1 minute left. There's so much to say about this topic. I think we all agree it is a fabulous time to sell, and there's all sorts of reasons, and hopefully reasons that our audience may not have thought of. So, Mike Nielsen, one quick thought before we close.
Yeah. So one quick thought is have the conversations, right? And what I mean by that is you don't know the things that you don't know. And that's something that I've been bringing up with most clients and most realtors is get them to have the conversations with the lender, get them to have the conversations with an attorney, get all of the information that you possibly can so you can make an informed decision. So if the sellers out there that are on the fence thinking about selling, they don't know if they can move, upgrade, downgrade, right size, right, name the story of what their outcome as to why they're selling. They're motivated for some reason for a different outcome. Don't just sit on the sidelines, go out and get the information, talk to a realtor, talk to a lender, get the information as it applies to your life so that you're not just sitting there every day going, oh, I'm not sure if I could do this, because you'll just keep asking yourself that question until you actually find the answers.
I love that. So in other words, even though this is an emotional process, don't make an emotional decision. Yeah, make correct. A well-informed decision. Great. Mike, thank you. That's a great point. Mike Guimares.
Yeah, I'm somewhere along the same lines. I think it's finding someone you trust that's a professional in the industry to have the conversations and do it as early as possible. You may think you're not ready to sell now, even though now's a very good time, but it may be 2 months away. Start preparing, start doing your homework, ask the questions, and put together a plan. I think, a lot of times, when sellers are talking about their property and their own situation, I mean, it's a personal thing, right? But you have to be willing to bounce those ideas and needs and wants and timing and everything off somebody that can help you get there. And I think that's critical. And I think to Sandi's point, in preparing your house, sometimes it only need a week, but sometimes you might need a month. And if you have those conversations early and you can start to plan, it won't feel as bad getting your house ready if you start doing that a little bit earlier than you expected to.
So even though now is a great time to sell, that doesn't mean if your house isn't ready, you got to take the time, listen to people you trust and people with an unbiased opinion like yourselves before putting that.
I think real quickly, I want to, that on that point, it's not personal. The hard thing is it's your house, right? And sometimes people give you a little bit of feedback and you take it negatively. It's not that in any way. What we want to help you do is get the highest value for your home.
Exponentially back the money that you invest.
Yeah, and that's our job. That's what we do. So that's great. Thank you. Sandi, any last thoughts?
Sure. I'm going to mimic Mike and Mike. Sometimes we have a place we want to be in our lives or something we want to do or a goal we want to achieve. I really would love to sell my house. Well, agents, start asking your clients or your customers, what's holding you back? What's the challenge? Or what's your fear? Because so many times we have some really creative solutions on how to get them over that hump of that fear or that challenge that they didn't even know they could navigate. And part of it is what Mike Guimares was just saying about maybe just giving them a timeline. They get a timeline and you set them up with other vendors that can come in and help, like this guy that's going to help you with the landscaping, this one over here that's a junk removal guy that's going to take care of over the next 2 weeks the basement, and just really getting to know the fear or the challenge that they are facing, because then it will get them to that, putting that for sale sign in the yard.
Love it. Ask questions, be open, be honest with the experts that you're trusting. And I think that's a big message too. But yes, I love the expression, we have 2 years and one mouth for a reason. So as experts, that's our job, to listen, ask questions and listen. So thank you very much, Sandi, Mike G, Mike N. You are, all three of you are fabulous. I know the incredible work that you do for your buyer and seller clients and for Jack Conway and Guaranteed Rate. So we really appreciate your being here, sharing your time and your expertise. And thanks to everybody for joining us. Our time is valuable and you spent this last 49 minutes with us and we're very grateful. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.